Hello, today is October 28th, 2019. This is the Testing Commons subproject, a subproject of SIG testing. I will share my screen. Here we are. As we've been working through things over time, we have the larger level picture of the world that we've been slowly trucking away against. George has thankfully kept us honest by routing issues our way. So if there are a set of PRs that we need to look at, we just pretty much go through them. Are there any other agenda topics or things that we want to discuss today?
I don't know. So Amici, I don't think he's on the call, but there was a Slack conversation we had around when it's appropriate to pull methods and functions back into the actual test files versus keeping it in the framework. And so I think we all agreed that if there's a method or function that is called in more than two separate test packages, then we can pull it into the framework. And if it's called in two or less, then we just duplicate it into those packages and keep the framework simpler and cleaner. I think it's just worth kind of hashing that out in this call and at least coming to a consensus in the subproject.
Yeah, so let's take a look here. It's this one in particular, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's the issue. Is that a PR or an issue?
This is the issue. During the work of reducing invalid dependencies in the end-to-end core framework to subpackages of the core framework, we found that a lot of particular test-specific functions. That means that each function is used as a single E2E test module only. These functions are unnecessary to be shared in the end-to-end test framework. So we've just moved these functions to a particular test module like this. Take a look here. It's in the framework networking utils. And he just makes it a private function inside of the submodule.
Yeah.
And I totally think that's a fine thing to do. That's in line with the overall idea.
Yeah, so I think we just need to agree, like, what is that magical number where we say this is called in too many places, let's pull it into our framework so we can just call the framework, or just keep it duplicated?
This one is only once, so you can tell that it's clear. I don't think there's a magic number. I think there's a level of prudence. Like, you have to take a look at how it's being called and whether it makes sense to have that dependency. Because if you look inside of the code, there are weird dependencies that shouldn't exist all over the place. So it's a matter of factoring things appropriately. I think one of the things that, as a general comment, that of the stuff I've seen, is that we did a lot of really just low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better term, of just shuffling code around. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of at the point where we should take a little bit more of a mindful eye and say, like, is this model layered appropriately? Like, in shuffling out the code structure to have like an initial framework networking utils into having a separate, he put it into the tests.
I think he joined the call now.
So this one is fine. So like I was saying before, I think the overall flow of this particular agenda is at the point where we need to start adding a little bit more jurisprudence and figuring out what's the right layering model that we want to have of where these calls are used from, and whether or not they need to be in the framework, whether or not they need to be in a submodule of the framework, or whether or not they should be in the specific test suite for that leverages it. And I think we need to do that probably on a case-by-case basis. I don't think there's a magic number.
Okay. I think it's because and because you're on the call, you can kind of speak on this. But I think the intention was to divvy up some of this work for new contributors or for the community to take. And so kind of having that concrete guideline might be useful, but I agree that we have to kind of judge it on case by case basis.
Mm.
Were you going to say something, Amici?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So thank you for pick up this topic. So, and yeah, I'd like to see and review these parties if we have consensus moving forward for this direction. And yeah, and my concern is that we will be able to create another invalid dependency between packages with this PR issues. So I'd like to review to block this kind of thing in this work carefully. So this is my point. And yeah, this work itself is very simple and easy. So I'd like to finish as soon as possible.
I don't have any problem with this work. I think the one thing we just need to be careful of is making sure, as we shuffle code around, is that sometimes some of the code that we might want to take a look at, instead of just doing raw shuffling, should be more well factored. This is an easy case where it's just like, just move it. But some other things along the way, it will be a lot less clean. So we'll have to make sure that we tease it apart appropriately.
Yeah, I think like when we initially started this refactoring work, the framework was in a pretty bad state. So we said, just shuffle stuff around as is, just to get us into a decent state. But yeah, I agree that like we've done enough work at this point where maybe we shouldn't, like the default shouldn't be shuffle code. It should actually be like shuffle and improve where possible.
Yes.
So I agree.
So let's just say, so the answer is where needed, shuffle and improve with and trying to determine a composable set of libraries. Trying to create. All right. Does that answer that question? Right. Next up, Hippie. Framework injection of test context seems to be inconsistent. So you decided to take on the super fun, impossible task of looking at test context. Or test context, or no, test config, never mind.
It's there. It works most of the time. Like I would say up to 98% of the time. And trying to find this last bit, if you scroll up just a little bit, this is the comment on identifying exactly which audit events are generating the problem. If you'll click on, or just look at that 4 days ago comment, the second one, I suspect it's related to the EDE framework not updating the user agent. That's the code, and it's in that commit referenced above. I haven't gotten a whole lot of feedback on this other than it sounds like that's a good idea, but now that it's not quite working as expected, I thought I'd put it in front of the framework folks and say, what is the best way to do that? Is this an approach that there were other approaches we could have taken, to linking together a particular API call to an audit log entry. But this is what we're currently using. If there's an obvious way that these leaks are occurring, it would be great to fix it, because then it doesn't require a lot of updates to the conformance of it, because it's all based on tying this this user agent in.
I'm trying to think about this for a second here. I'm lacking enough context to make this.
Go ahead and back into the PR itself, the one that's referenced, the Kubernetes 22.9e, and open that up a bit so you can see. When we're hitting this function, it's right when the before each is called, and if the client set is not available yet, we're creating a Kubernetes client for this particular call. It may be my if client set 155 is wrong. We go through and on 159 see if the component texts are in existence, and if not, if they are, concat them together and append them to the user agent string.
One of the things that strikes me as odd, because this thing could be run in parallel, was that you should, in order for you to ensure that there's only one and the client set is set to one, is the problem that you have multiple client sets? Is that the base crux of the problem?
The crux is I'm getting client calls. So client is getting, I guess the client is getting called without the context being set at all. So if you go back and look at the issue that I reported, or the issue that he reported, Liggett brought in, if you look at the actual events, if you scroll down a bit in the queries, you can see that the user agent is hitting, the EDE test is hitting it, but it doesn't have -- in the test applied. So it's still setting the default user agent. So it never hit this code, or it's hitting it, it's calling API calls without before each being called. Or without the client set being updated with the user agent config set.
And this is only used as a breadcrumb for you to do your analysis.
That's
It's an
our
inbound. Yeah, it's your primer. So you basically, every call that comes in through before each for the tests is your piece that you need for you to determine if that's a conformance test on API Snoop side.
Yep.
Versus like string matching with the output of the conformance files. Because you have the string, you have the entire text set of all the conformance tests that are basically done through the dump of the additions, because they're explicitly done through a separate file. So this is an appending. One, there's a bug here for sure that we should fix and solve. Two is that I don't think that this is the only way you could do it. I think there's many ways you could do it. I would probably use pattern matching with the existing files as the canonical set. Because then it would just be a hash versus a parse, right? Like if it contains, it's a hash. So you go through and then it matches. Because you have an entire text dump of all the conformance tests with their details that exists inside the KK repo underneath the conformance thing that gets added every time you add the conformance tag to it.
That one, it has the string and the file name, but the string is not complete. There are multiple strings that are exactly the same. They're not unique. There was another effort where we talked about adding a unique identifier or something so that we wouldn't have to go this other route, because they are unique per file, but they're not unique across the data set, and we don't know what the source code coming through.
Well, you could easily, this is a finite set, so it's 200, less than 300. You could easily make these each unique. to verify that your tests are, whatever time you hash, you have a unique identifier inside of each one. Now that said, you're fixing the other problem. If we were to look at it in more detail, why is before each not being called every single time? One thing for sure, this is the before each for everything. I would definitely have locking on this call, which currently does not have, because you can execute these things in parallel. So I could even see an escape hatch. Well, framework is global, but you could get race conditions here on potentially having multiple client sets. That's one thing you can immediately see.
Wrapping that in a lock.
Right here, yes. This whole utility should be like a defer unlock, right? Like a lock on entry and a defer unlock for exit.
Well, what's confusing is there shouldn't be, the client set doesn't exist yet, and anytime it does get called to create it, it still should be. It's as if we're making a client call within the code and it's not using this client, the one created in before each. It's as if those calls are being, where another client is somehow available. I'm not quite sure how that would work. But
that's what I said. There's no locking on this call. If you have multiple before each is being called, if your sweep is being run in parallel, because like that exists all over the place. And parallelization was added before probably this thing was even, or it was added after this thing was originally probably created. That there should be a lock up here, and this lock would basically said, like, before you even do this check, you have a lock on the before each that will eventually serialize just this portion, and that's totally fine because the actual execution of the test will all be in parallel. So I'm totally fine with the before each being locked and then having the defer unlock. But the way this is written, it's totally possible for you to have multiple client sets.
I agree the lock is a good idea. In general, what's confusing to me is it's really consistent which ones, whether we run it in parallel or whether we run it in serial. So I'm not sure that it's a locking thing.
How could you not have this added? Well, then there's a bug somewhere else, right? Like if you could bisect, what I'm trying to say is if you put the locking here and you still have the bug, one is better to have the locking anyways. We'll definitely merge that PR. Second part will be like, okay, we eliminated that set of possibilities. Like where deeper down, why does this client set not have this preamble, right?
Yeah.
Which it should. And that would have to be somewhere inside of the client code. So I would do the bisect approach. That makes a ton of sense to me. What other people think?
I'm not entirely following like what's happening. So like, yeah, I kind of lost track at some point.
So this piece here adds a context for everything going through a given client set to have this preamble, right? So that means every call will have this preamble. API Snoop is gating that preamble, that's using that to consume. But some conformance calls are missing the preamble. And we're like, why? Is that a fair statement?
Yep. If you go to the test, or the issue and scroll down, you can see the -- added in the other test for the other endpoint. So if you scroll to I think the last selection, you can see these are audit IDs and the operations. Actually scroll up a bit. I guess we didn't include one that has that second selection where the list API extensions resource definition, it has the EDE test coming in and kube controller manager. Those are the user agents reported by those binaries when they hit the API server. And if we're trying to append for EDE test, there's usually a -- at the end. And we're appending that. Sorry, not the easiest.
Right here. This portion here.
You see we're filtering to find where the user agent has API machinery in the test name. And so if you scroll to the right, that second code block, you'll see the other endpoints, the second code block. And that's where dash dash gets added, and then the entire string context name to identify which test is currently speaking to the API server.
And some of them are missing.
Yep, because then we look at that other endpoint we select and we see, well, these are the endpoints we know it is hitting, and there's the two E2E test binary hits that don't include the test string. It's weird because it's happening later.
Yeah, so my first thing when I looked at this is I know, so when I was in my head, I know that you can have parallelization in the test framework. So it's possible to have multiple client sets. So you could get to the point where you could get a weird race condition where each one comes through or something. Now, if you just eliminate that, then you have the second question of like, why is this not being added to every single test? Because there should be only one client set. And then I have no idea.
Well, but then on line 176, we're setting the client set, which means like once you pass that, any before each after that would skip the nil check. Am I missing something?
It's actually called before each test. And it's actually, since we have the it actually only gets called after the it block. So it should, and that's why it seems like it's.
But the framework is global though, so it
is. Yep. But like it is global, but you can get into this weird scenario. I mean, I think the first one, I don't think is going to solve the problem. I think there's a bug somewhere else in the client tooling. And that seems more realistic to me. So you have this config, you're adjusting the user agent to have basically the context there. You're saying the default, I don't even know why they set this. No one ever adjusts these knobs.
Just in case.
So I guess my question is like, are we seeing that the first set of tests do set the user agent and then tests after that don't? Or is it the other way around?
I haven't gone through, and because it's hard for me to know if I could go through the query of all the audit entries and select everything where we're hitting the API where the user agent isn't set correctly and give you a percentage, but I don't know what it's tied to. It's hard. I'd have to do everything in sequential and then look.
Yeah, so I'd say do the first thing, which is like low-hanging fruit should be done anyways. Do the locking, and then come back with the data to figure out like, what are the tests that, are there a certain set of tests that are consistently doing this? If so, how are they different? Right?
We don't find them until we're looking at them really closely and we're missing coverage for promotion. Why are we not hitting these endpoints? It's very specific calls. It's the same calls every time, which is, we'll bisect it and get rid of the lock. But I'm also interested in other ways that are very precise in tying together an API call to the audit log. And because it allows us to do other things than analyzing clients, not the E2E test suite itself. We have the audit ID, which gets returned by the API server on each call. If there was a way to record the context locally for that call, that way we could load basically the API server's audit logs with the recording locally of which test was running. You
could plumb unique identifiers through the calls and then have like a verbose flag that you could use to like get the data out. Like you should be able to get that data out today if you do -v10 or something like that, that you probably get the entirety of the context of the calls all the way through. But that's inside of API machinery. That's not in the testing framework, right? So that's basically says like, I have this context, it has this unique identifier pass through or pass back. I don't know if there, do we actually do that in the API server? Do we pass back a unique identifier for the given thing? We do?
Yeah. So API machinery generates the unique ID, and I think, is that right? Yeah, and on the client side, if I remember right.
Then if you do a -v10, I would be amazed, and I'd have to look through the code, but I would be amazed if that wasn't spewed out somewhere inside the -v10.
All right, I'll create 2 tickets. One to bisect this into having a gate around it, and then another one for exploring getting the verbosity to explore the audit IDs out of the.
Yeah. You can pass that today through, and you should be able to run it and see it.
Okay, we'll explore those too.
Yeah. But you might want to have it's possible on inspection that it doesn't exist, and if it doesn't exist, how do you plumb it to expose it? Probably at a verbosity level that's not 10, because that's just TMI, right? To dig through.
The problem right now is most of our analysis comes from what's already in the audit logs, or whatever is in the bucket from a resulting job. So when if we change what we're analyzing, then we have to add more stuff to the jobs or information that I can't go back and look at previous executions.
That's fine.
Why we were trying to do just the audit logs by themselves.
So I think there's a couple of approaches we can take. I think doing the first one to try and figure out why the config doesn't seem proper, because your config should be initialized, and debugging that one first makes a ton of sense. Then based upon the data you get back, then taking the second approach of trying to figure out getting that data out of the client and seeing where it is coming from, and then figuring out if we need to plumb through more logs or not. Okay. That should be more than enough detail to keep you going.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep. Next up, doing the continual triage. We have a fair number of PRs pending here, and not all of them are assigned.
Feel free to assign some of them to me.
All right, so I'm going to ignore some of these ones that have multiple nodes or multiple SIGs attached to them. Replaced images with egg host. We can't even do those things, so I'm going to skip that. Egg host, skipping that. Check code for avoiding circular dependency. This has been approved. It's still marked as a whip though. Nomichi's gone.
Yeah, that one is actually kind of blocked. I'm still so some time ago we added an import restrictions file into the end-to-end test framework, and it turns out that we never the import restrictions are not actually turned on. So currently the import restrictions is it's not gonna work if we just start using it. So have to go back and still fix it and then turn it on. And this one is blocked on that work.
So why don't we update this notes? I'm going to actually assign you to it because you have more context than I do currently that we swapped in. It's the...
You had that few backspace, that third one there. Yeah, second one right there.
That one, thank you.
Right. Promote node zone region topology labels. Nope, not touching that. Promote pod disruption budget. Nope, not touching it. Remove Prometheus add-on. From KubeUp. This kind of crosses boundary lines. This is more like say cluster lifecycle, really.
Yeah, so that one is an interesting one. So the instrumentation people, they deleted a lot of files for setting up Prometheus in the cluster of directory, and to go along with that, they removed all the mentions of Prometheus from the end-to-end test framework. So so right now, just to so the big question is, if the only people that are using this are the people from SIG instrumentation, should we just get rid of everything that mentions Prometheus in the test framework, or should we keep it? And the other one, it needs approval because they're actually changing the test framework.
Well, I'm okay with them removing dependencies for specifically for the deployment of Prometheus. There's a bunch of other details inside of the code itself, as well as the daemons that export Prometheus metrics. And this is basically the deployment of Prometheus. So I'm totally fine. If they want to remove it, that's their business and they own it. So go for it. So I'm cool with this. I don't see anything else in the framework. Let's go back here. That's the test suite. And this is basically the, okay, yeah, I'm totally cool with it. So all they're doing is the knobs to enable the deployment or the testing of it based on the deployment.
Yeah.
So. Design refresh. Do not merge. Skipping. Test S large request tests. So John's already assigned, so I'm skipping. Optionally run E2E pod as privileged for SE Linux. Ooh, I don't know if I want to look at that. So I believe some of the stuff was removed a long time ago to enable support for Windows. Yep, right here. I'm going to assign this to Claudio first. Verify. All right. Fix coroutine leak in resource usage gather.go. This isn't assigned to anybody.
You can assign it to me. I can review it.
Poop. Can't go back. Default the enable C advisor endpoints flag to disabled. That's fine by me. Well, people keep on like percolating deployment configuration all the way through. This kind of like The never-ending story of my life is that we need component config super badly, like yesterday, because this type of stuff just percolates everywhere.
That's a kubelet thing. I think I'm not sure we should even look at this.
I think Dashpol is assigned, isn't he? Yeah, he is. I'm gonna don't care. Reduce the need to use local kube control. I think I've been assigned, but I don't know if I've ever reviewed this. Does somebody else want to review this and approve it? I'm not gonna have a lot of time.
I can help review.
Change test NSLOOKUP to NSLOOKUP minus Q. So these type of things I can't even change because I think they require container rebuilds. I don't want to touch this. Specifics assigned. I'm gonna assign. Bang. Make claim provision timeout of our. Who's this person? Working in EKS. Wow, I don't know if that's make it a variable.
But that doesn't actually make it configurable. Isn't that what they want? Like
They might be subsuming their own test framework. I am using the intent test framework to test my AWS FX for Lustre CSI driver. Wow, that's a specialized use case for conformance and upstream features. I want to create my own private supercluster inside of AWS.
So they're like overriding the variable at build time, I guess, when they build the.
Due to the fact that it takes 5 to 7 minutes to provision FX Lustre file system, this default. You need to plumb it through. I am not going to allow. Who LGTM this?
I did.
Is that
I think.
what?
Oh, actually, never mind. I remember I saw this.
I think like it sounds like the reason why they wanted a var is so that like you can set vars when you compile binaries, whereas constants you can't. It sounds like that's what they want.
Yeah, but they should really plumb it through. Like if you're going to do this, you should plumb this sucker through. You shouldn't. That's like, you know, hey, I've got a window. I can just break the glass in the window. Just get my
right.
house.
But like it sounds easier to like give them the var and let them shoot their own foot versus us adding new things, test context or other things to account for it.
That is a fair statement. That's a lot less work too. And if you want to do this this is a super weird use case. Lustre file systems are only used for hyperscale big deployments, like, and they're only for like specialized use cases. No one would dare do this for a non-bare metal use case. If they did, they're crazy. And this is being recorded. So if you're out there in the world listening to this recording, this is a crazy use case. But I like your take on it. If they want to go into the wilderness, like let's let them without plumbing it through for the common use case.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll stamp this. I'll leave this, but I'm highly offended by it. Just wait. Once you have your kiddos, Andrew, you will know the taglines for every kid movie ever. Make E2E check service check affinity wait longer to avoid flakes. Seems like a weird story. I think it's because it's on the searcher.
I can follow up on this one. Well, it also looks like Umichi got it too. So.
Yeah, I would follow up though. You probably have more context in digging into figuring out the flakes. Survey says update default etcd server to 343. That doesn't seem like it would be in our bucket. Separate end-to-end network from E2E core framework.
Mm.
It looks like he's just doing standard cleanup. Do you, Alejandro or Andrew? Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, I can look at it.
How
It's a
about
big
both?
PR, so give it to both of us.
Thank you.
See if I can bypass. No.
I've been wanting to change my GitHub handle, but I'm like, man, I don't want to go through all the owner's files.
No, you don't. So everything cascades. My GitHub cascades through my Twitter, through everything else, because the Tim St. Clair at Google originally had like Eccles ahead of me on a bunch of things, and he changed his name. So damn it. So originally he had Eccles everywhere. So I found a non-colliding Eccles that would exist across all systems back in 2009. Move functions to expect.go to common. This looks like another similar thing. It's weird. Why? I don't get this. Is this because pods is not 8? No, this is, why would you not do this? I don't get this change at all. Is that the only use case of this function? Is that the reason why?
I don't remember, like, I know Patrick brought this up, and then George, there was another issue that you raised earlier. But like, isn't there some work around like getting rid of E2E common? Or like, in what scenario do you use E2E common versus like just throwing it in an actual test package?
Well, I think this specific, from the look of this, it looks like this was the only call site for this specific signature.
Oh, I see. Oh, so this is going back to that issue we talked about.
Yeah.
About duplicating.
And he's just ripping it out of common because it's not actually being called by any other place but one. I'm kind of okay with that, but it's a little weird. I don't know. This one in particular is a little odd because you'd almost want this utility function.
Yeah. And it would be like if you expand that file, we already have a bunch of expect like functions,
Exactly. Yeah.
and we'd be splitting them up.
I'm gonna say a no on this one. Too bad Amici left. I'm guessing this is one of his. I will. I don't have to think about what I want to say here. I'll skip it. But move function of framework to common runtime class. I think this is another one. I'm probably okay with this one. This seems a little weird. Is it just a totally dangling? Who wants to take this one? Somebody needs to dig into why this is here.
Can I take it, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm guessing that little change is probably why it's all failing. In case you're wondering, Santa Claus is not coming to visit. That is my dog playing with the bells. And going crazy in the background.
How old's your dog now?
She is 6 months actually this week, so she gets spayed this week. Move functions to NoVutil to GCP.
You can probably assign that one to me.
I guess it's the bottom one. Yep. Moving on up. Change describe item to a local function. As long as it passes, that's fine. First needs okay to test. I will first. I can take this one. Is that the only test that fails? I'm fine with it the way it is. Okay. Refactor events in end-to-end.
Yeah, I don't like the double E's either.
All right, you spoke. You get it.
Sure.
What are these events?
Sorry?
Are these
These-
new events? Like, what is this event type?
It's refactoring the framework to move events out into their separate location, into a submodule. So it's calling it E2E events. So all this is part of the core shuffling to remove the dependencies needed to vendor the framework.
Right.
So right now, like only a limited subset of the tests you can see here, which is like container probe, runtime class, are actually using these dependencies. So, but the problem is like the signature depth graph of vendoring the framework is everything in Kubernetes. So step one is to minimize the depth graph of vendoring the framework so people can use it outside of the core.
Right.
And that's kind of the end state. Because people already do vendor it outside of the core, but like if you actually see what they do, it's like an abomination of demand. So try to minimize that dependencies. Does that answer your question, Hippie?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Refactor app, armor, utils, and NM test. It looks like Alejandro is already working on that. Move functions for create type code UDB storage, and also looks like Alejandro. All right, so I think that's everything. We've got 5 minutes left. We got a lot of stuff done. Sweet. Any other stuff that folks wanted to have questions, comments, complaints, concerns about?
I had one related to how we're doing you'd mentioned doing some work on, let me get my video on the client for polling or what watch. And in looking at that, it seems like some of the logic for iterating over that is there's some conversation around it. I need to find the ticket real quick, but I could use some thoughts on it. It seems like trying to iterate through all of them doesn't provide much value, apparently, even though we're wanting to increase the coverage. So I made a measure for some how many operations have watch, which is like 170, and we currently do 30 of them and trying to iterate over them. I can find the ticket.
So just broadly increasing test coverage for watch behavior is reasonable. Like what happens is you have inside of the API server, you have the scatter of code for every single resource type, and then you have a gather which goes back to the storage layer. So verifying that like every single resource type independently actually goes to the similar code paths and the behavior is correct is a reasonable set of tests that actually does more than just increase the numbers, right? It actually is testing a set of use cases that are currently untested.
It seemed like I was trying to get to the thing, but there was some feedback from Reddit. There wasn't I don't know how to find their tickets. Is it in our umbrella conformance coverage?
Well, what you can hit me offline on that particular one.
I'll hit you offline. Sorry about that.
And I can come back to it.
Thanks, Tim.
Are there any other last questions, comments, complaints, concerns? So I have a complaint concern, more of a concern. How do we get more people interested in wanting to write good tests?
You should tweet something.
Should I angry tweet something?
Angry tweet.
Maybe I should write a post in the tweet. I got to write another post this week. So my other post is about growing in open source, which I think is good, which is like stewardship versus ownership. Because I said I was going to do that. So I think that's a good thing to write. Maybe I can write something about testing too.
I think the biggest hurdle for me is like the feedback loop. like if I add a test, it's really hard for me to test that my test works. And it's oftentimes easier to like open the PR to see if it works. And a lot of times I need to like push commits like 3-4 times to like for the CI system to like verify for me the test works. So it'd be like, I know there's Kind and there's a lot of tools out there to make it easier, but it's still pretty hard to write a test and then easily verify the test works and is validating what I want it to validate. So maybe if we can make that easier, it might be better.
It's hilarious in that like I totally open PRs to verify things, and I use that as my actual bot versus me actually doing the. So like everything I do is like, imagine I had 12 washing machine lines. Right? It's like you put your load in over here, and you go work on something else. You put a load in over there, and then I come back over here and just see if it actually failed or not. Then I open it up and like, oh crap, more quarters, more soap. Go back.
We do the iteration pretty quickly here, and we have some documentation we walk through that they use for each test. It goes through, and they just have like a living document on the left, and they execute a section of that, and it runs the E2E test, allowing them to click on the line numbers and go through. I'd love to help find some way to do more pairing or onboarding people to writing tests, and maybe collaborate on that. Post with you, Tim, if you're up for that.
Sure.
Or maybe like we can add a script in Hack or something that will easily run all the tests in a package, or it's just something that's more like easily consumable, because I'm always like looking up how to run tests based on the context names, or I forgot what it's called, but like, you know how we have like tags and tests? Like I'm always looking up what the regex is for that to put into the test framework.
I mean, that's part of why we made Sonabuoy the way we did. It's the easier test runner, and you can run it. But the problem is, like, if you make a test over here, you have to update containers and everything else to make it all work, right? So like, Anyways, let's think about that and percolate on it. If you have thoughts, please hit me. I've got a hard stop, so I got to go anyways. So feedback is solicited on the minimizing the bar. So take care.